Hey, what's going on, crew? Welcome to another episode of To the 20 Percenters, where we focus on what matters: health, wealth, relationships, and time. Brought to you by Inner Circle. And I've got the immense pleasure of sitting down with Chris Widener, founder of WidenerCoaching.com. How are you, man?
Doing great. How are you?
Awesome. I am extremely excited to not only have you on the show, but also be working with you on all things speaking and mastermind, as that is where I am positioning myself henceforth. And 20 Percenters is in an upward trajectory and moving nonstop right now. So it's by no coincidence that you wound up in my circle through our mutual network, Tammy Fellowes and Paradise Valley Lifestyle, and a handful of other folks that connected us. And when we sat down to just kind of discuss the way ahead, the very first thing you mentioned was positioning. You steered me towards that book, which I finished, and it was extremely enlightening. And you've worked with the who's who of speaking, especially with regards to motivational speaking. And you've done work with John C. Maxwell. Worked with Zig Ziglar.
I did, yeah.
And Jim Rohn. Matter of fact, you did the last interview with Jim.
Yeah, I did the last interview with Jim, and then I co-wrote his last book called 12 Pillars. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So how does, because you've lived many lives.
Yeah. My life has been interesting.
Which, professional poker player for a while.
Mm-hmm.
And, I
don't even know if you know what I started out doing.
No.
From 88 to 2002,
okay,
I was a pastor.
Really?
Yeah, I always love that. I love that look on people's face because it's not like on my speaking page and stuff. It's not. It's not up on there. But it's kind of how I got the gig with Maxwell because Maxwell used to be a pastor.
Sure.
I don't know if you knew that or not. But from 88 to 2002. But I was also speaking full time and doing my speeches. So I'd preach on Sunday mornings, and then I'm at Microsoft on Wednesday afternoon, and then Sunday morning, and then General Electric, and then Sunday morning, and then Harvard Business School, and for years and years I did that.
Okay.
And then I started ghostwriting for John in early 2000s.
Okay.
Yeah.
How did you how'd you meet these guys? How'd you wind up in those circles?
So I met Maxwell through that pastor's sort of successor. I mean, I can remember going to John Maxwell seminars when the only people in there were like 100 pastors.
Okay.
And it cost you $97 for the day, and then he'd fly into town and he'd teach you how to lead your church and stuff like that.
Okay.
So I met Maxwell that way, back before he was a nobody. I mean, he had a big church, so he was big in the Christian world.
Yeah.
But he had not made the jump to become sort of a regular mainstream leadership guru.
Okay.
I actually took a graduate course from John in the late 90s.
Okay.
Took a graduate leadership course from him, graduate level. And then I met his team. It's kind of funny. This is interesting. Now we're going really sidetracked, but it is an interesting lesson. I wanted to get involved with John, and I'd met him a little bit, but I wasn't really working with him or anything like that. And I went out. It was shortly after September 11th, 2001.
Okay.
Like 2 or 3 weeks, I was speaking at Harvard Business School. So flying into Boston 3 weeks after 9/11, all the TSA guys were, I don't even know if it was TSA at the time, if that's what they called it, but I mean, still with the M16s and everything, Logan was in lockdown.
Sure.
Well, I went to lunch with a guy named John Cotter. John Cotter is the youngest guy ever tenured at Harvard Business School. He was tenured at Harvard Business School at 24.
Oh my goodness.
And he wrote what's basically considered the Bible of leadership. It's called Leading Change. To get John to come and speak is like $300,000, followed with like a $5 or $10 million consulting project. I mean, it's big to bring him in.
Yeah.
And so the guy who was running John Maxwell's business at the time had wanted to meet Cotter, and I had never met the president, but somebody had told me, oh, you should call him because he wants to meet Cotter. So anyway, I went to lunch with Cotter, and I sat down with John Cotter, and Cotter says to me, very first question, I'd never met him before, and this was 2001. Shows you how quick John Maxwell's come along in the last 18 years. This guy, John Cotter, says to me, you ever heard of a guy named John Maxwell? And I said, actually, I have heard of a guy named John Maxwell. And he said, what do you know about him? I said, he's kind of the pop culture version of you. you're like the corporate educational leadership guru. He's like the pop culture, network marketing and young entrepreneurs kind of thing.
Yeah.
So anyway, here's how I got my deal with Maxwell. I called up, his name was Kevin. He was the president of Maxwell's group. I called him up and I got his voicemail. And I've never met Kevin before. He has no clue who I am really, probably at this point. And I said, Kevin, my name is Chris Widener, and I just had lunch with John Cotter, professor of Harvard Business School. And as you can imagine, what John Cotter knew was incredible. But it's what John Cotter didn't know that I think you'll find even more incredible. So if you'd like to know what John Cotter doesn't know, give me a call. Here's my phone number. And I kid you not, he called me back like 4 minutes later. He goes, that is the greatest voicemail ever left.
Yeah.
And he said, it totally intrigued me. So I ended up helping John and John get together and do some work together. And they brought John in to do some speaking engagements for their, they used to do like these simulcasts or something. So that's how I got to work with John. And then I was working with John, and then Jim Rohn, their company, called me. And I started working with him. And then I got a TV show in Dallas. And then the network I had my TV show on wanted Zig to do a show, but he was getting a little old. He was probably 79 80 when we did our show. But I knew Zig and his son Tom relatively well. I knew Tom because at the time I owned a company that was selling 50 to 75,000 boxes a month of personal development programs through Costco and Sam's Club. And Zig was in almost every single box. So every quarter, Zig got a check from us. So they were aware of me. So that's how I ended up with my TV show with Zig. But yeah, I've worked with Brian Tracy and Dennis Waitley and just some really legendary figures and good people. They've been very good to me. And yeah.
So how do you go from a crazy childhood in the Pacific Northwest to being a pastor to playing professional poker for almost a decade, to creating a living in speaking? Walk me through the transition.
So my upbringing was crazy. 28 homes, 11 different schools, shipped off to live with relatives twice, once in the 3rd grade, once in the 9th grade. Started drugs in the 5th grade, made my money growing up, betting the horses at Long Acres Horse Track. I was a ball boy for the Seattle Supersonics, as I mentioned before, and betting the horses, scalping tickets. I mean, I had a crazy upbringing.
Yeah.
My mom was gone working. My dad was dead. And so I was really just living a crazy lifestyle. I was really lost is really what it was. I had no adult supervision. I had no male influence in my life. My dad died. One grandpa ran off with somebody. I met him once in my life. The other grandpa died of emphysema when I was a little kid. All I can remember is him with oxygen in his nose. My uncles were kind of off, whatever. One of them, who I lived with, beat me half to death, so much so that on his deathbed, he called me to his deathbed and begged me for forgiveness. And then and my brother married a woman who hated my mother. So and he's 13 years older than me. So, at 17, 18, he goes to college, marries a woman who doesn't like my mom. And I never saw my brother. So much, I didn't know my brother so much so that when I got married, I asked him to be my best man, and he laughed. And then he goes, "Oh, you're serious?"
Oh, wow.
And I said, "Yeah." And he goes, "Oh, I'll absolutely do it. I thought you were joking because we don't really know each other." And I said, "Yeah, but you're still my brother." But so I had no male role models growing up, which in many ways, it's actually interesting. I get along very well with women, and I understand. I communicate very well. Like you could plot me down. You put me on The View, and I just gab. I think because I was raised by grandmothers and my mother and my aunts and my sisters, and so I kind of get how they communicate and they talk. And so I ended up meeting a guy who was a youth minister, good old boy from Helena, Montana. And he kicked me in the butt and really served a twofold purpose. One would be just being a male role model. And then the other, talking to me about God and a bigger picture and a grander plan and, that kind of stuff. So that was really good for me. I decided to go to Bible college, got my degree in youth and family work, became a youth minister in a small town called Mendham, New Jersey, which is a little tiny, very affluent town.
That's where my mom's from.
From Mendham? Your mom's from Mendham?
Yeah.
Oh, really? Interesting. I had kids in my youth group that made more money than me. Like literally one of my kids in my youth group had a TV show on MTV.
Really?
And just crazy, but part of being in that really successful, affluent town, I was taken under the wing by a number of really successful business guys, one of whom ended up the CEO of Mars Candies.
Okay.
When I knew him, he was the senior vice president of Mars, was living in New Jersey, operating out of Hackettstown. He went to Calcan, which is owned by Mars in L.A., became president, and then became president of Mars in McLean. But I mean, just a great opportunity at a young age, 22, 23, 24, to be mentored by some really great guys. So I moved back to Seattle, and I was going to become what they call a church planter, which is basically an entrepreneur. You start a church, right? How do you start a church? Well, you invite a few people, and then you invite a few more.
Right.
But we had no money.
Okay.
So I had saved up about $30,000 by the time I was 25, so I paid myself, and then I started speaking. And I had been doing youth speaking, high school, summer camps, junior highs, colleges, whatever. So I start doing all this. 2002, I start doing it full time. I leave the pastorate and I start doing it full time. Right about the time I hook up with John Maxwell, Jim Rohn, Zig Ziglar. I mean, that 6 or 7 years right after I left being a pastor was really crazy. And that's when I built my business selling through Costco and Sam's Club. At that point, 2009, I sold that company to my business partner. And it's about that time I really started playing poker full time because I just sold my company. I was still giving speeches. I mean, still doing 30, 40 speeches a year. But, you fly out, you give it, you come back.
Right.
I also played poker all over the world. Poker's interesting. I learned a lot about life. I learned a lot about myself. It's really fascinating if you take it seriously.
Yeah.
Everything from math to psychology to people skills. So much interesting in it. And did that basically for 9 years or something like that. So yeah, it's been crazy. I ran for the U.S. Senate in 2010.
How'd that go?
Well, it was interesting. My best friend had run for governor twice.
Okay.
And so we had nobody running for office, like literally nobody. Nobody of any substance. And I had gotten really well known in Washington State because of, just my interactions and my friends and my network. And so I thought, I'm doing it. I'm jumping in.
Yeah.
Now, I hadn't even ever run for dog catcher or anything. So I decided to run for the U.S. Senate, and it was really amazing.
Yeah.
I spent 6 months doing it. The whole time I was doing it, the national party was trying to get me not to.
Okay.
Even though it ended up there were 12 of us running for office. I was the only person that she pulled under 50% against. And I was the closest person to her in terms of the gap between, and this is a 3-term, 18-year sitting U.S. Senator against a guy nobody's ever heard of before.
Yeah.
But the Republicans, my party, they didn't want me running because they wanted my best friend to run.
Okay.
Because they thought that he could raise more money and spend more money, even though he was going to lose. They knew he was going to lose. They knew nobody could beat her, but they wanted somebody who could raise a lot of money, spend a lot of money.
Yeah.
So here's the national, and Democrats do this very same thing. So it's both sides.
Yeah.
It's the national trying to monitor and move the chess pieces. And so I eventually did get out of the race because there were 12 of us. There was like one super far right, like Tea Party guy.
Okay.
And then there was 11 of us that were like what we call the center. Center right. And all of a sudden I realized, I did the math and went, he's going to get 25% and we're going to split 75%. He's going to become the candidate. I'm not going to be a part of this. So I got out.
Okay.
And then my buddy got in and then the rest of them scattered.
Okay.
And then they ran. He beat that Tea Party guy and then he got beat on the other one. So so my life's been full. I've done a lot of interesting stuff and it's been fun, some great experiences, some hurtful experiences, some exciting experiences.
Yeah. Tell me about your calling to teach and coach.
Yeah. So probably 20-something years ago, I did a personal mission statement. And this is what everything gets run through. My podcast partner, Larry Wingett, he always says, you do so many different things. And other than, maybe playing poker, but in the grand scheme of things, I said, but everything falls under my mission statement. And that is, I will use my writing and speaking skills to help other people turn their potential into performance, succeed in every area of their lives, and achieve their dreams. Coming and doing this podcast fits that. Writing my next book fits that. Giving a speech fits that. Coaching somebody fits that. Running a mastermind fits that. Taking up painting doesn't fit that.
Right.
So I run everything through whether it's going to fit my skill set and whether or not I'm going to be able to use my skill set to meet that goal, which is helping other people.
Right. Okay.
So that's how I run everything. I run everything through it.
What was the catalyst that crystallized that for you?
That crystallized me.
Your mission statement.
Probably just knowing that mission statements are like guardrails, right? Because otherwise you really could do anything.
Sure.
Anything that comes along, oh, that sounds fantastic, let's go. But I knew that people are only successful if they're operating out of their strengths. And I know what my strengths are. Writing and speaking are my strengths. And so I just decided that that was going to become the way that I kind of put some guardrails on what I did. So I didn't go too far over here, over there.
Yeah.
Poker was, it was funny. Somebody asked me one time, in fact, Joe Polish. Do you know Joe Polish?
Yeah.
Joe Polish asked the
him.
Genius Network.
Yep.
He asked me, we were at lunch one day, and he said, what have been the 10 best years of your life and the 10 worst years of your life? And I said, oh, well, the 10 best years of my life were 2002 to 2012, and the 10 worst years of my life were 2007 to 2017. And we chit-chatted and talked about it. And I'm surprised he didn't notice it, but I noticed it later. I thought, 5 of my best years overlapped with 5 of my worst years.
You tell me about that.
From 2007 to 2012 were both named as the last 5 of my best years and the first 5 of my worst years.
Yeah, tell me about that.
Well, so my career was going great. It's when I had my TV show. It's when I was making all that money selling. I mean, we were selling $1.5 million a month of boxed audio programs through Costco. That was going well. Career was going great, but then that was also really, I had bought my dream house. I drove by it for 21 years. My front gate was 500 feet long of brick pillars and wrought iron and double gates.
Yeah.
I mean, anybody in the Seattle area, east of Seattle, knows my house. Okay. Like, I'd be on airplanes, and they're like, where do you live? And I'd say, Preston. And they'd say, oh, Preston, I drive through there every now and then. Have you seen that house with the big red tile roof? That's my house. And they go, oh, wow. Well, long story short, I paid $1.3 million for that house in 2004, and I ended up losing $2 million on a house I paid $1.3 million for. I always say, hey, anybody met somebody that lost $2 million on a house they paid $1.3 million for? Well, now you have.
Right.
County came on, they took an easement. I had 30-foot sinkholes. I sued the county. I dumped all this money into trying to keep my house from falling into the river. Yeah. It was a big fiasco. It was about the time my marriage started falling apart. So it was both really good in terms of business and career and things like that. It was really bad in terms of the financial pressures, lost everything with that house. Because I had just started coming out of being a minister. When I bought that house, I started making a lot of money, bought that house, and then it goes in the tank, and we're afraid it's going to fall in the river. And it's about when my marriage started going really south, and it was so it's this mixture of, and that's a great life lesson, really, if you think about it. All the greatest stuff happening at the same time all the bad stuff is, and it's just this swirling tornado, and successful people have to know how to navigate that. Well, and I think I went into poker to, I think probably I went deeper into poker to escape.
Got it. Well, that brings me to my next question. How do you manage the overlapping of the 5 best years and the 5 worst years and come out of that okay? Because while you're in it, there's got to be like this neutrality where, as awesome as things are going and as terrible as things are going, it's kind of like this, I'm not going anywhere.
Yeah, except I think if you step back for a moment and you become objective, you realize that is what life is. Life is positive things set against negative things. If nothing else, the fact that you're going to die, right? If nothing else ever goes negative, you still stop existing like 60 years from now.
At some point.
You can do this great, and you can make a fortune, and you can do this and that and everything, and then it's gone. Throw it all back in the box and give it to somebody else, right? But that's in best case scenario. Right. But I mean, stuff happens. Children go astray, children die, parents get sick, your spouse gets cancer, you lose a job, you go bankrupt. I mean, that's just life, right? But at the same time, you're finding true love, and your children get A's on math, and you're whatever. Like, you can list all these positive things that happen. Right. And so one of the things I do with speakers when I'm helping them craft a keynote is I give them a beginning and an end, and I say, chart all your highs and then chart all your lows, and then we do this with it, right? And you can see that it's this balance.
Sure.
I wrote a book. It was the first book I ever wrote. It's never been published. Less than 10 people have read it. Big, thick. It's a novel. It's called 4 Seasons. Okay. And it was written against the score of Antonio Vivaldi's book. Not album. That's the wrong word. I listened to it on CD. His concert, or whatever concerto, whatever, violin concerto, called The Four Seasons.
Okay.
So I wrote it, and it's about this very wealthy man. The whole book is 1 year. Very, very wealthy man, magazine publisher, who he's coming home. The opening scene is him coming home, finding out he has like less than a year to live. So he has 4 seasons left to live. And the story is about him dying, set against his 35th wedding anniversary, his son graduating from high school, his daughter getting married, his first son having their first child. So this whole year is this conflict between the great, amazing things of life set against the fact that this is the last Thanksgiving I get. This is the last grandchild I'm going to see. This is the last Easter I'm going to celebrate. This is, and so that's life. And I think once you understand that, I think frustration happens when we see our goals go unfulfilled, right? Absolutely. So our goal is to have this perfect life. Our goal is to have a bunch of money. Our goal is to always get along with our spouse. Our goal is to have our children get straight A's. We've got all these goals, and then they don't happen, and we become frustrated. And everything's going great, and then all of a sudden somebody gets sick. If your expectation is that everything's always going to go well, then when something doesn't, you become frustrated. If your expectation is that life is this contrast between great things happening and not so great things happening, then when this happens, you go, oh, okay, I can handle that.
Right.
Instead of, oh my gosh, I'm not over here anymore. This has happened. It's not supposed to happen. Yeah, it kind of is. It's life. Well,
that's very interesting. Paradox, number one, but also the mindset that you're talking about. They talk. You've heard it numerous times in TED Talks and the military, and the number one predictor of success isn't experience or education. It's grit. Your willingness to lean into adversity and see. And just push through the problem and be solution oriented and so on and so forth.
Have you read that book, Grit?
Oh yeah.
By I can't remember his name, but he lives in San Luis Obispo, and he and I have a mutual friend, and he's got this beautiful mountaintop estate, and he's got this beautiful barn, and we did a 2-day meeting in his barn. But I love that book, Grit.
Yeah,
I can't remember his name though.
It's just really incredible. But what you're talking about isn't so much the grit of it all, the willingness to be persistent, if you will, but more so the objective acknowledgement of the other side of the coin.
I'll give you an example. We live in Phoenix.
Yeah.
And we have this friend who spends all summer on Facebook complaining about what? What do you think she complains about all summer long in Phoenix?
The heat.
The heat.
Right.
And I'm like, dude, you've lived here for 20 years. Like, it's hot.
Right.
So it shouldn't surprise you or cause you angst when it is.
Right.
If it does, then maybe you should move.
Sure.
Be like somebody in Seattle going, oh my gosh, now we've had 8 months of rain. You've had 8 months of rain in Seattle for thousands of years. It rains, or millions, however long you want to go back.
Right.
I do think that the way we perceive and interact with things mentally determines whether or not it affects us or not. Right? If the average lifespan was 40 and somebody dies when they're 40, you expect it, right? You'd say, well, he's at the end of his life. I mean, and not too long ago, before the invention of penicillin and many modern drugs, the lifespan was 40 or less.
Sure.
And so, we'd be like, oh, that's to be expected. Still sad. But if the lifespan is 78 and somebody dies at 40, freaks us out. Why? Sure. Because it's the way we perceive it. So whatever angle you're looking at something determines how you're going to interact with it.
Yeah.
And if something happens that you are looking at from this direction, but it comes from this direction, there's going to be some conflict.
Right.
So would I say that I expect bad things to happen? I would certainly not trying to make them happen.
No, I mean, that'd be a pessimistic view.
But it happens.
Right.
Jesus said, in this world you'll have trouble. And I say this in my speeches, there is no bigger truth in life than that.
Right.
In this world, you'll have trouble.
Mm-hmm.
Well, but what about these rich people who have these great lives? Yeah, their wives leave them.
Mm-hmm.
Their husbands cheat on them. Their children get sick or get in drugs.
Right.
Their parents get Alzheimer's. I mean, bad. It's just part of life, right? Is that there's struggle.
Mm-hmm.
And if your perspective is struggle shouldn't happen, then you'll be frustrated and always running from it. If your perspective is struggle exists, then when struggle happens, you go, okay, how do I take care of this?
Yeah.
How do I overcome this? How do I utilize this for my benefit?
Was it that same, forgive me for forgetting his name, pastor, mentor that planted that seed of being solution oriented? Like, just, okay, I can't avoid problems happening, but I can put myself in a mindset or a state of being where I allow myself to feel what needs to be felt, but let's start moving towards the solution and find our way out of this.
No, I don't think it was him. I don't really think it was anybody. I think it was the fact that I was thrown into life with a sink or swim kind of thing.
Sure. Okay.
And I suppose there's lots of people that would have had the same thing happen, and they would have been long gone and whatever, killed themselves, drug OD'd, gone to prison, all those kinds of things. But I think being thrown into the water, sink or swim, one of two things happens. Like, I can walk in anywhere. I could come here and sit down. I'll be yapping to people almost like this.
Right.
People are like, how are you able to do that? I think I told you the story in Mykonos, Greece. We sit down in this little tiny bar, and there's a little older couple there. Long story short, it ends up it's Julian Fellowes, the creator of Downton Abbey, and the playwright of Mary Poppins, and and his wife. We sit there talking. Had I not started talking to them, we'd have never known we were sitting next to a guy who created the #1 show of the last 20 years.
Right.
But I think it was, so that's a real positive. I can talk to anybody. It stems from a real negative that I went to a different kindergarten than I went to first and second grade, then I switched in the third grade, then I switched in the fourth grade, then I switched in the fifth grade, then I switched in the seventh grade, then I switched in the eighth grade, then I switched in the ninth grade twice. I was constantly being thrown into new places. Well, what do? You either learn to talk to people or you shrink off into the corner.
Right.
And I suppose there are some who shrunk off into the corner. It just wasn't me. I was just like constantly, I'm going to conquer this. I'm going to beat this, because I've always been a fighter. I was in sports. You played sports, right?
Yeah.
There's kids with 5 minutes left and they're down by 3 touchdowns, and they're thinking to themselves, well, we'll get them next week.
Right.
Then there's other kids who we're down by 3 touchdowns with 5 minutes left, and it's like, okay, if we do this, we get the ball back, we do this, we're still in this game.
Right.
Right.
Yep.
That's the same way you deal with life. Right. There's people that fight to the very end. I know we're probably supposed to be evergreen on the podcast here last night, but last night I was watching Monday Night Football.
Yeah.
And down to the wire, and my Sea Dogs, they did it, last second.
Yeah.
Because Russell Wilson doesn't quit.
Yep.
Now, if we could get Russell to play in the first, second, and third quarters the way he plays the last 5 minutes of every game, we'd win by 30 points every game. But for some reason, he always likes to get himself in this position where he's like, time to pull a rabbit out of the hat.
Right.
But I think that's, Russell's 5'10", he maybe $190 dripping wet or something like that. You look at a guy like him, and you think he's so great, highest paid guy, highest rated guy in the season this year. Why? Because he doesn't quit, and he's a winner.
Yeah.
Like, there are some people that aren't necessarily as physically gifted or as mentally gifted or as whatever gifted.
Yep.
Talking not just about Russell and football anymore, but across society, who they're just winners.
Yeah.
They're always going to find a way to win. And that was always me. I mean, look at me. I'm short, fat, old white guy now, right? But in basketball, I found a way to win.
Yeah.
I summer before my senior year, I looked at the record on the wall for most assists in a season, and I knew I was going to be starting point guard that year, and I said, I'm going to break that assist record. Yeah. And I did. Broke the assist record for my high school that year because I chose to do it, and I went out and did it. Yeah. And I think that all starts in your brain.
Sure. I'm rereading Think and Grow Rich right now. Yeah. In the aftermath of Positioning, which we'll dive into here in a second. And the predominant theme in that book is that desire has to come first. and everything else is facilitated by that desire.
Right.
It's not education, it's not experience. It's all of that stuff will accumulate in the wake of your desire.
Mm-hmm.
There's nothing that positions you to that desire comes after.
Mm-hmm.
And you say you look at that scoreboard or you look at that record and say, I'm going to beat that record. Right, you desired to beat that record. There was no plan.
Well, no, what I desired was to prove to my coach I should have been the starting point guard my junior year. That's what I really desired. And he did apologize to me my senior year. He actually did in the middle of one of our tape things. He looked at me and he goes, "I'm really sorry."
Well, no, that's so true because I can remember going into or the completion of my senior year football season, and we have our team awards. And I get overlooked for I was captain all season. I was a marathon man. I played I played both ways.
What's up with these kids nowadays? Yeah. They don't even play all three sports.
It's crazy.
They play one side of one sport, and it's like,
dude, it's killing sports.
It is. It really is.
The early
specification. Yeah, it really is. It's horrible.
But I get looked over for being a defensive player, the defensive player of the year.
Mm.
And I can remember just being how dejected I was. And
what'd you play, defensive end?
Mm-hmm. In high school, I was a safety in college.
Right, I know. You moved to the bigger level.
Yeah.
Now, so you're not the biggest guy in the field anymore.
Shit, so okay. Yeah, I'm the small guy in my
now
group
you
of
are,
friends.
yeah.
And I can remember coming home and just being absolutely dejected, like ready to just hang it up, like it's just not going to happen. I was playing out of position to begin with, so on and so forth. Woe is me. And my dad just said, "Son, you're going to get everything you deserve."
Mm.
And the way that manifested, I ended up going to state in the 110 hurdles, and then for senior superlatives,
change your name to Ronaldo.
Right. In senior superlatives, I was voted athlete of the year. Well, that trumps the shit out of whatever I was expecting to come from the team.
Yeah.
And so I think that's kind of what we're talking about here.
Yeah, when I was 8, I had a similar thing.
Yeah.
It was my second year of football, and I was the running back at the time. I hadn't switched to quarterback yet. I was playing running back, and we did our pizza party. At the end, they always do the pizza party, and they give out the little trophies. And so we all got our little trophies, and they said, now we got a couple extra special ones. And he said, this defensive player, blah, 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 whatever. And then he comes to most valuable player.
Okay, yeah.
And I'm like, I'm a shoe-in for this.
Right.
Like, I'm a shoe-in for this. And he gives it to the other running back, Scotty Balkos.
Oh, his
still
name.
remember the kid's
Holy
name.
Shit.
I mean, 45 years later, I still got Scotty on the brain. And so Scotty got most valuable player. I was hacked. I mean, pissed.
Sure.
Steaming. And he goes, now we got one more after this. And I thought, well, that's weird. I thought most valuable player was the pinnacle one. So they saved best actor for the best picture for the very end, right?
Sure.
And I'm like, that's weird. And he goes, now this next one, it's most inspirational, blah, blah, blah. And he goes on, he goes, you know what? I figured out this year that if I ever needed one thing done at any given moment, I could ask this kid to do it, and he would do it. If we're on the 8-yard line and I need it in the end zone, this kid will get it in the end zone. If the other team was 4th and inches and I knew that we had to stop them, I knew that all I had to do was yell, Chris, and it would be done. And I was like, wow. I mean, it was one of those head-spinning moments like, whoa. I was so ticked off because I didn't get most valuable player.
Yeah.
And I'd never even heard of most inspirational. Like, I don't even know if I knew what most inspirational player meant.
Right.
But one of the greatest awards I ever got. 8 years old, second year of football, comes right off the heels of being ticked off at Scotty Balkos. Right. And then I get what I consider an even greater one. And considering what I end up doing for a career.
Yeah.
Perfect.
Right.
Yeah.
That's wild. It's interesting how it all works out. It has always amazed me because when we're talking about adversity and the bad things happening in life and not getting the award that we thought that we deserved, and then all of a sudden we get the bigger deal, the greater check, whatever. It's like when you're attempting to do something great or you have big expectations of yourself, it seems to me that the universe or God or whatever your belief is, right before that thing happens, you get this kick in the nuts, as a test of your resolve, or, just to let you know, give you an instance of adversity so that you appreciate the awesome that comes afterwards.
Yeah. I mean, I look at a guy, what's the guy's name? Sumner Redstone.
Okay.
Sumner Redstone, billionaire. I think he owned Viacom. I mean,
Okay.
the guy's been a corporate raider and a billionaire for 30 years.
Okay.
And he's living in one of his big, 40,000 square foot homes. And Sumner's, I'm assuming he's still alive. The last article I read was about a year ago. And, now he's at this state where he's drooling all over himself. He can't dress himself. And his girlfriend, his ex-wife, his son, his daughter by another woman, their mother, blah, blah, blah. And it is a feeding frenzy on Sumner Redstone's fortune.
Yeah.
I mean, everybody's suing everybody.
Right.
And you can't be his nurse because that nurse is trying to steal this.
Yeah.
And he was out of his mind when that nurse got him to sign everything over to this. And it's just like, you'd look at a guy like that and go, man, the last 5 years of his life are just going to be horrible.
Yeah.
Horrible. But he'll get to drive a Bentley. It's like I don't know where we got mixed up along the way. I mean, I love, what money can do for you, and I love good stuff, but jeez, a lot of people need to figure that out.
Yeah. So what drives you?
It's actually what drives me is the topic of my book that I'm writing right now. In fact, I was writing on it today in a chapter called Plot Twist. What happens when you're cruising along and all of a sudden there's a plot twist of life?
Yeah.
Most of the time negative. But it's impact. Lasting Impact is the name of the book. Lasting Impact, How to Create a Life and Business That Live Beyond You. And so for me, it's getting to the end of my life and knowing that there's going to be a ripple effect, that when I die, it doesn't end.
Right.
That there's some sort of ripple effect to my books or my audios or old videos or, the people that I leave behind, my children, whatever. I want to know. That's really what drives me, I think. And the fact that my dad died when I was 4.
Yeah.
And so he was 41, I was 4. I think that left a profound imprint on me that life is short.
Sure.
You can go anytime. In fact, my brother, it's funny, my brother's 13 years older than me. On his 41st birthday, my mom called up. My mom was crazy. Crazy in a good way, crazy in a bad way.
Okay.
Like, I think she had borderline personality disorder.
Okay.
If you want to ever look that up, I'm convinced she had borderline personality disorder.
Okay.
But she called my brother up on his 41st birthday, wished him happy birthday. She says, how you doing? He says, oh, I'm actually doing really good now. He said, I hate to admit it, but I've been really scared the last year. And my mom said, what have you been scared about? And he goes, well, Dad died when he was 40, so I just assumed I was going to die when I was 40. I've been terrified. Now, what should my mother have done? She should have said, oh, it's going to be great.
Yeah.
My mother says, Glenn, your dad wasn't 40 when he died. He was 41.
Oh, shit.
And my brother spent another year terrified that he was going to die at 41. Well, now he's 60. He's 66 now.
Okay.
But anyway, no, that's I think that death was a profound imprint on me that you never know.
Yeah.
Which is part of, Jim Rohn and I's book. We talk about you can't determine how long you live, but you can determine how well you live. So you can take an 80-year-old guy who basically just breathed oxygen and took up space, didn't do much, whatever, didn't give much, didn't really interact with the world, lives a long, healthy lifestyle, doesn't make much of an impact. Or you can take a 10-year-old little girl who gets cancer and she's sitting in a cancer ward and she looks around and somebody brings her a teddy bear and then she sees all the little kids without teddy bears. So she decides to start a teddy bear nonprofit so that every little kid in American hospitals can get a teddy bear. Next thing you know, Americans donate 10,000 teddy bears. Like, that's impact.
Right.
It didn't matter that she died at 10. She made an impact. Or it doesn't matter that he lived 85 years old. He didn't make an impact. Impact isn't about how long you live. It's about how well you live.
Is that where you position yourself on the stage?
It's a little bit. I'm reading Repositioning because I'm doing a little bit of repositioning. For years and years, and this will be a platform, obviously, for my repositioning, because it certainly helps that I'm well known. But,
Yeah.
I was the guy. I was the next guy. I was always going to be the next guy. Like Jim Rohn's endorsement of me says, Chris Widener is the leader of the next generation of personal development experts. And, and so all these guys gave me endorsements. I write fiction, parable kinds of books. The only 2 fiction books Zig ever endorsed in his entire life were 2 of my books.
Okay.
He in fact, had, for something like 75 years, had refused to read a fiction book. He hadn't read a fiction book his entire adult life.
Wow.
Tom convinced him to read my books.
Okay.
So that was sort of my thing. I was like the guy that worked with all the legends. It was certainly great to have your name mentioned in those, in those conversations.
Yeah.
Now at the stage I'm at, 53, I really want to help other people get their message out.
Okay.
Because it's really, Jim Rohn was given the Master of Influence Award at the National Speakers Association. I think it was 2007.
Okay.
Master of Influence Award is an award that's given by the president of the association for that year. And it was a guy named Mark Sanborn. And Mark asked if Jim would receive it. And we talked to Jim, and he said, yeah. So Jim came, and as he was doing the introduction, Mark looked out. He was the president of the National Speakers Association. He looked out at all these 2,000 speakers and said, how many of you would say that Jim Rohn has had a significant impact on your life and business? 2/3 of the hands went up. I will never forget that. I went, wow. It's not just the work Jim does. Jim did 28 countries the last year he was alive at 78. I haven't done 28 countries combined.
Yeah.
He did 28 countries the last year of his life.
Right.
Well, the last year of his life he was sick, but the second to the last year of his life, last year he worked 28 countries, right? And so, he had a lot of impact he made in his own speaking engagements. But then I started doing the math. If 1,500 speakers do 40 engagements a year, and they each have 500 people at those engagements on average, wow, his impact isn't here.
Right.
His impact is here.
Yes.
And so that's really become my philosophy. I mean, I still give my speeches. I'm still writing my next book. But I'm really starting to look now and go, okay, there's other people that have cool stuff. Like we have this gal that we work with on our management company, and she's a women's empowerment speaker.
Okay.
And she said, Chris, she's relatively new. She's very talented and accomplished, but new to the speaking world.
Got it.
10 years at Harvard Medical School, graduate from Berkeley, doctorate from Berkeley, whatever. Yeah. She says, you're this world famous speaker and you're this and you're that. And I go, why are you helping me? And I said, because nobody's going to ask me to come into a corporation and talk about women's empowerment. But if we can help you get in to talk about, I'm helping women get empowered.
Yeah.
Right?
Sure.
And so by helping people who have a different message, a great message, it's a way for me to impact. And that's just sort of it's kind of the transition a lot of people go through when they get over 50. Okay. In fact, there was a book written by Bob Buford called Halftime, and the subtitle is Moving from Success to Significance. And so you get these, and Bob Buford wrote that book 35, 40 years ago. I bet it sold 10 million copies over the years. Yeah. Big book in a lot of circles. But the idea is too many people get to be 50, and they look around and they got their wife, yeah, check, got the kids, check, kids are going to the right college, check. I got the Beamer, check. I got the house, check. I got the vacation, check. Why do I feel like I have no purpose?
Right.
And there's a lot of people that get that because we're so materialistic that we're told that is the purpose.
Yeah.
Get the house, get the vacation home, get the car, get the this, get that, and the every other thing, and then you'll be happy.
Right.
Which is why the fastest growing rate of suicide is affluent white men. And I'm convinced that the reason the fastest growing segment of suicide is affluent white men is because these affluent white men have been told their whole life that once you become affluent, you'll be happy. And then they get affluent and they go, not happy.
Yeah. What a letdown.
And now they have no idea what to do.
Sure.
Because for 30 years they've been told this is what you do. And when you get this, then you're happy. Then they do that. They waste their whole life. They get there and they're not happy and they go,
yeah.
Well, now what?
Well, do you think that along the way to becoming affluent, they ignore the call to lead?
I don't know what you mean by that.
So I feel like anybody that's on a mission to accomplish great things, right? Eventually, the opportunity or opportunities will present themselves to pay it forward, become a mentor, light somebody, guide somebody who's lost, right? Which speaks to significance, right? Becoming.
Yeah, most significance is giving.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Becoming the guide. And do you think that they turn down that calling? They ignore it. They completely dismiss it. Don't acknowledge it.
I'll tell you about somebody I knew, very wealthy surgeon, and retired, and was kind of complaining about how boring life was. Yeah. And he was very well known in his town, a large city in the Midwest.
Sure.
Had the biggest practice of his particular kind. And I said, why don't you take some young surgeons in your field of practice and mentor them?
Yeah.
I bet a bunch of 30-year-olds would love to meet with you he literally had the largest practice in this entire state.
Yeah.
Now he was retired. He could have gone, and he ended up spending 5 days a week golfing.
Yeah.
And always feeling a lack of a sense of purpose.
Yeah.
But he wanted nothing to do with taking that time. And I was even suggesting, like, once a month, go to lunch with these guys and buy them lunch and just informally mentor them or something. You want nothing to do with it. And that's what a lot of people do.
Yeah. I have a mentor, and his mission in life, he's done all the things. He's become affluent, checked all the boxes, right? And his mission in life now, above and beyond any career aspirations, is to impact somebody, at least one person, each and every day, right? That's more of a reason to get up than, looking at all the numbers and making sure that your company's on the right trajectory.
Yeah, I'm trying to do that. I've been thinking about that a lot lately, like just every single day.
Yeah.
Stop worrying about what I'm going to do tomorrow. Stop worrying about what I'm going to do Thursday, Friday, Saturday. Just today.
Yeah.
Be present every moment with every person every day.
Absolutely.
And it creates a whole different focus in your life.
Totally.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And I feel extremely fortunate to have been plugged in with individuals like yourself who get that bigger picture, who understand significance. And there's a big enough gap between you and I in age and experience where I can.
You are considerably older than I am.
You're right. You're right. Age before beauty. I get it. I have the opportunity to take advantage of that. And I feel extremely fortunate to be in this position, not only to cast this wide net with the podcast, but also leverage that knowledge and experience. And at 35 years old, rather than have that aha moment at 50 and, have to pivot and decide to turn the ship around, so to speak, so I'm eternally grateful to be in your circle, and
yeah, and that's how I felt about.
Sure.
I mentioned the guy who was Mars. Some of the other people that took me under their wing. Guy played quarterback in the NFL. Guy was the former CEO of Sealand Corporation. The number 2 guy at Prudential. Just one person after another who sort of invested in me. Not anything official, right? But just lunches and coffees, and we'd be sitting in meetings, or their kids were in my youth group. That's how I got to know them, right?
Okay.
So I'd end up at their homes for dinners and vacations and things like that, and just the way that they invested in me with thoughts and ideas and things like that.
No, that's so massive. And I think that the emphasis on significance over success, and having got that so early plays into everything that you're about now. So for the 20%ers out there, where can they find and support your initiatives and everything that you got going on?
Yeah, sure.
Your books, you've got over 20 books out there?
Yeah, just go to Amazon. That includes some ebooks, but most of them are hardcover books.
Sure.
I think I have 5 or 6 pages I was looking at the other day just on Amazon. If you go to chriswidener.com and hit store, it takes you to Amazon. I don't ship anything. It just goes to Amazon.
Yeah.
Audible, you can get tons of stuff on Audible. In fact, we've converted all of those Costco things over to Audible now. You can download them. Great great audio programs. But WidenerCoaching.com is my coaching, which is I'm doing a lot more of, trying to just invest in people.
Sure.
I have 6-month and 1-year coaching programs where we get on the phone twice a month and we specifically go through things that they want to accomplish, whether it's business or life or a mixture. I end up with it's funny, I seem to end up with one of two things: either people who are having marriage problems, and so they hired me to do business, but we end up talking about marriage problems, or I've ended up with a ton of young guys who are taking over the business from their dad. Like, if I had a nickel for every 35-year-old who's taking over his business from his 75-year-old dad.
Really?
Yeah, I've actually even thought about starting like some sort of a brain trust mastermind of these 35-year-olds who are taking, because they're always like, and it's always the same. My dad said he was retiring and getting out and giving me the business, and he's in the office every day. That's how it always starts.
I got a buddy like that who's in real estate now, because his dad, when he was exiting the military, was like, this will all be yours one day, and he just wouldn't retire. So he's like, Dad, I got to go do something else.
Yeah. Well, I mean, if you think about it, talking about significance, and this is what I told the first guy that I ever had this happen with. I said, think about, he was like 28 and his dad was like 75, and he had just taken over this $20 million a year business from his dad. Yeah. And I said, okay, think about this for a minute. Your dad, for the last 53 years of his life, Monday through Friday, got up and came in here. And now, last Friday, he walks out the door like he has for 53 years at 5 o'clock. And you expect him not to want to come in Monday morning at 7 a.m., right? This is like Brett Favre.
Yeah.
Brett, God, just retire, all right. Just retire. I mean, honestly, when Brett Favre was going through his whole exit from the NFL, I said all the time, I'm like, dude, go get a counselor. Like, that's what you need, is a counselor to help you transition out. Oh, yeah. But if you think about it, if Favre could have come back the next year and just walked on the field and started, he would have. Right. Until someone literally tied him up and took him off the field, right? But he couldn't. Well, your dad can. There's no security guards saying, sorry, you've got to retire now. So he's back in the office. And there was always conflict. So, but I do a lot of coaching with entrepreneurs and a lot of people who want to become speakers and that kind of stuff. Okay. Yeah.
Well, I'm excited to be working with you.
Yeah, man. It's a lot of fun. Yeah. Very cool to meet you and Nicole.
Yeah, definitely. Guys, get out there and support everything that Chris has going on. If you're interested in speaking, if you're interested in mentorship, this is a man of resource. So I really appreciate you taking the time today. Yeah. And coming up at the end of the year, we have the New Year Network. Go to 20percentercircle.com and check that out. I'm really looking forward to having you guys there. And if you haven't read Inner Circle, make sure you take a peek at that too. You can find it in digital at 20percentercircle.com, and you can find it in hard copy on Amazon. And until next time, guys, focus on what matters: health, wealth, relationships, and time. We'll see you next week.